you think you know the story of how Rome began, right? Romulus, Remus, the whole she-wolf thing. Well, what if I told you that famous legend is basically a cover-up for a much, much wilder truth? The real story is about a city that honestly had no business even existing, let alone becoming the heart of a massive empire. So let's dig in and uncover the real secrets of this accidental metropolis.
Yeah, we've all heard this a million times. And it makes sense, right? You picture this grand, deliberate plan, a steady process of construction slowly taking shape over centuries.
But what if that whole grand process happened in completely the wrong spot? Seriously, that is the real puzzle of ancient Rome. When you dig into the evidence, the big question isn't how it was built, it's why on earth was it built there? And trust me, the answer is going to change everything you thought you knew about the Eternal City.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at Rome's super unlikely start and meet the 3 tribes who actually founded it. Then we'll see just how truly awful the location was. But, and this is the cool part, we'll uncover its secret weapon. We'll even find out it was originally 2 cities, not 1. And finally, we'll put it all together to see how this accidental metropolis was truly born.
Okay, first things first. We've got to clear away some of the rubble, so to speak. Before we can get to the real story of how Rome began, we kind of have to forget the story we think we know. I mean, who doesn't love a good superhero origin story? And the tale of Romulus and Remus is one of the best. But, when you actually look at the history, the archaeology, the real story is so much messier. And honestly, way more interesting. Rome wasn't just, poof, created in some heroic moment. Nah, it was cobbled together, bit by bit, through a really messy and often conflicted process. So, if we're tossing out Romulus and Remus, who were the first Romans? Well, it wasn't a couple of brothers. Get this. It was 3 completely different communities who decided to team up.
Yeah, the number 3 is absolutely key here. Everything about early Rome was structured around it. The entire community was split into 3 parts, or tribes. It was so fundamental, in fact, that the Latin word for a third, tribus, is literally where we get our word tribe. It just came to mean a piece of the whole pie.
So let's meet them, the real founders of Rome, the Romneys, the Titties, and the Lucres. The Romneys were the local Latins. The Titties were likely Sabine, and the Lucres were probably another Latin group. Now, don't picture this as some big, happy melting pot. This was a straight-up political alliance, a strategic merger between different groups for a common goal. And this whole thing, this kind of merger, it wasn't just a Rome thing. It was actually a pretty common way for cities to get started back then. There's even a fancy Greek word for it, synoi kosmos. It's how Athens was formed too. Instead of building a city from scratch, you just get a bunch of separate communities to join up and become one big, powerful state. That is the true foundation of Rome. Not a wolf, not some mythical twin. Okay, so we've established Rome was a merger, a team-up. But that just makes the location even more baffling. Because, and I am not exaggerating here, the spot they chose was just a terrible, terrible place for a city. No, really, just look at this laundry list of problems. The air? Unhealthy. The soil? Useless for growing anything good. Good springs for fresh water? Nope. And that river, the Tiber? It flooded all the time, turning the whole area into a malarial swamp. Oh, and on top of all that, they were surrounded by communities that were way more powerful. I mean, it's like they picked the worst possible spot on the map on purpose. Which brings us right back to that central question. Why here? Why would anyone pick this spot? And how in the world did a city with every possible disadvantage not just survive, but go on to dominate the world? There had to be something else going on, some kind of secret.
And what was that secret? Well, it's beautifully ironic. The answer was the river. The very thing that seemed like its biggest problem was actually its greatest strength, a total secret weapon hiding in plain sight.
See, here's the thing you have to understand. Rome was never meant to be a quiet farming town. It was built from the ground up to be a center of commerce and military strategy. That river, the Tiber, was the interstate highway of its day. It was the main artery connecting the entire region to the sea. And if you controlled that river, you controlled everything. Think about it. Its location made it the perfect frontier fortress against enemies from the north. It became the #1 port for all the traffic coming up the river and from the sea. It commanded trade on both banks all the way down to the coast. Plus, it was just far enough inland that pirates weren't a problem. And of course, it was the perfect spot to set up a toll booth, basically, and collect duties on everything that passed by.
This made Rome a city of traders and merchants, completely different from all the sleepy farming towns around it.
But wait, the plot thickens, because the story's even crazier than that. Early Rome wasn't one city. For a while, it was at least two separate rival communities existing right next to each other.
Check this out. On one side, you had the Mount Romans, the Montani, living up on the Palatine Hill. On the other, you had the Hill Romans, the Collini, a rival community on the Quirinal Hill. These weren't just neighborhoods. They had different names, different strongholds. They even had their own separate groups of priests. That's how you know they were truly distinct groups.
So yeah, these weren't just two parts of the same town. They were basically two separate political powers, probably fighting for control. The unification of Rome wasn't part of some grand destiny. It was a long, messy process of rivalry and eventually simple necessity.
Okay, so let's put all the pieces of the puzzle together. How do you get from 3 tribes, a swampy location, a strategic river, and 2 rival cities to the Rome we all know?
Well, it happened in stages. First, you have that core city on the Palatine Hill. Then, suburbs start popping up around it. But at the same time, that whole other rival city is forming on the Quirinal Hill. And for a long time, they are separate. It wasn't until way later, when they finally built the massive Servian Wall, that everything, both cities and all the other hills, got enclosed into one single metropolis.
And this quote just nails it perfectly. Rome wasn't some ancient village that grew organically over time. It was a creation, a purpose-built commercial hub designed to control a river. Its rise to power wasn't fate. It was the result of a series of very smart and very opportunistic decisions. So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway? The story of Rome's beginning isn't some epic myth about gods and heroes. It's a much grittier, more practical story about politics, trade, and geography. The city triumphed not in spite of its terrible location, but because of it. It truly was an accidental metropolis, forged into one city through rivalry and eventual union. And that kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on, right? The story of Rome shows that the truth is often way more complex and compelling than the legend. It makes you wonder, what other great stories of history, the ones we think we know so well, are just waiting to be re-examined?